and welcome back to the Creative Shelf, and good to see you all. So before I lose any time, I'm just going to go straight into the content of this video. So you've just either found out about tarot, or you're coming back to tarot after 5 or 6 years away, like a hiatus, which is what I did, and it's 2020 or 2021, and you kind of like see that there's like, I don't know, like 100 decks that are available on Book Depository or Amazon, and you've got like 2 decks and you're like, oh my god, I've got to have some of these. So anyway, I wanted to talk about buying decks, especially if you're new to tarot, and this is a video response to Matt from Tubby Tarot. So I'm going to link his video below because it was a really good video, and I don't need to go through all of what he said again. It's a response in a way to that, or an add-on. And also, this is a response to a post I saw on Facebook, where I saw a member of the community, and I don't need to go into it, but it's one of the Facebook groups that I'm a part of, and bless her, this woman was basically saying that I love tarot, but I've just gone and bought a lot of decks, and I think I've bought too many, and you know, there's this feeling of being overwhelmed and not feeling sure of what they've bought or what they've spent money on, and I kind of like just wanted to add to this because I could see it coming, actually, with not just with this person but with all of us, including myself, and I wanted to share my own experiences and what I've done to help myself. So a quick backdrop to my story is that I kind of like first picked up, well, I know about tarot for years, but I kind of like first picked up the cards for myself in 2015. We didn't have much of like a range on Amazon at the time where I live. I live in Belgium. There was very few decks. And on top of that, kind of like, I didn't even know what I was doing. So I checked Amazon reviews. I didn't know about Tarot Tube and all of that. I just checked a few Amazon reviews, and they suggested things like the Rider-Waite-Smith, you know, the classic deck. And I actually have here, I'll pull it out here actually, the foundation deck that I use is the Radiant Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which, you know, I'm not saying you have to buy this one, but I went and bought this, and it's US Games, and you can see it's already falling to pieces, the tuck box. But basically I just went and bought a deck and a couple of books, which I'll show you in a moment, and I just was trying to figure out like what am I meant to do with these 78 cards. And you know, that was the reason, that was like kind of like my beginning. And I did, because the person that I am, I did see that there were a few other decks that Amazon had also brought up in its search engine. And of course, me being me and wanting to spend that money, I kind of like bought a couple of other decks, which I'm happy to share with you. But the moral of the story, the point of the story was that we didn't have much available. So in a way, I was kind of like constricted, and I think looking back, that was a good thing. But today there's a lot of decks available, and what I'm seeing is that when people come new to the community, you know, it is normal to want to explore, and I don't think that's a bad thing. So somebody comes and joins the tarot community, they might get a Rider-Waite-Smith or Rider-Waite-Smith clone, something very similar, or maybe a modernized version of it, which is something like the Light Seers deck. I don't have personally that deck myself, but I know it's fantastic and a lot of people use it at the beginning. But they get that, and then of course in these tarot communities, whether it's like on YouTube or in a Facebook group, then comes all the other decks, right, that people are talking about, that reviewers are talking about, and quite rightly. And then it's kind of like, oh my god, I'm intrigued, I want to get this one and I want to get that one. And it is normal to want to buy another 10 decks within the first week. I think it is anyway, but I think to want to buy it. But the problem with that is, and I'm sorry about the noise outside, but the problem with that is, right, is that at the beginning we don't know what we like. And so first of all, I just want to assure everyone who is at the beginning that if you buy like another 5 decks and only 2 are ones that resonate with you and the rest don't, that's really normal. So my suggestion is, and this is what I started to do when I was buying decks last year, trying to figure out what I liked, was that I quickly started to really notice decks that I was interested in, I kept going back to, and then ones that I bought and I kind of like had looked through, and then for some reason they sat at the side. That doesn't mean I've got rid of all of that and I don't like them. Some of them I went back to and I do like them. But I kind of like really tried to make a note of the fact that not everything was ticking my boxes. And so the next month, or a few weeks later, when I wanted to buy another deck, I started to become a bit more careful, like, okay, why am I buying this? So tip number one is to make a note in your journal, notebook, or keep a little notepad on the side of decks that even in the first impressions after you've opened it, like, my God, like, I love the cardstock, or I love the colors, or as you go through it and you see a card you don't like, for example, it triggers you in some ways, or you don't feel very comfortable with it, that's also something to note, like, yikes. And the reason why is that is also a good way to think that the next time I want to buy the deck, perhaps I make sure that I at least see 2 or 3 reviews spaced out, so you get a really good chance to just get to know the deck via a YouTuber or several YouTubers, or tarot tubers, sorry. And secondly, you can always Google the deck, and if it's one that's been published, mostly you'll find somewhere a set of all of the images, so you can actually look through them or just do a skim through. So my first tip is to note what you like and don't like, and then also to think about the fact that and that goes into the second tip actually, yeah, so to actually go and check out tarot tubers and their reviews, and to Google it. And that goes on to the third tip, which I'm going to give you, which is, my thinking is, once you see a deck that you like, don't buy it for at least another 72 hours. Sit with it. It's okay. And in those 72 hours, either watch lots of reviews if you want to, or forget about it. It's fine to just put it in your wish list and forget about it. The other thing to do, and I like to do this, is to really think about whether or not I have something similar. If I have something similar and I want to add to my similar collection, that's fine. If I have something similar, I'm thinking, wait, I'm done with this. Like, I currently have something like 5 animal themed tarot oracle decks. I love animals. I love animal themed decks. I want to add to that collection, but what I don't want to do is have 20 in that collection. So now if I add to it, I have to really think, like, is this a classic that I've always wanted? Is the cardstock beautiful? Is the images beautiful? Do I know if the guidebook that comes with it is one that I'm really gonna love and enjoy? And so once I start to do that, there are some decks that I've recently seen where I'm just like, okay, I don't need to buy that actually. So I'm just giving you here a tip that, like, use those days before you go and make a purchase to just dig a little bit deeper. The other thing that I would suggest before you go and make the purchase is also to think about whether or not, that what is the style and the quality of that deck. And that's also something I want to bring up, is that sometimes I've bought decks and I've not liked the cardstock, and not liking the cardstock in itself has put me off using the tarot deck. So you might be thinking, well, can you just show us some examples? So a really good example here is the Nature Spirit Tarot, which I think is a gorgeous deck. I bought it because I love the images. It was Kelly from the Truth in Story who did the review of this deck, and I fell in love. She did a great review. And the guidebook is fantastic. I mean, look at that guidebook. It's got a lot of depth in it. It's, if, for example, if we take the Death card, we have within the guidebook, we have commentary on the card. We have a little bit about the actual animal that's used in here, and then just kind of like, where you will find, and so in this one we're using the blackbird, where you will find the blackbird, the tree, just the actual description. I mean, basically I love the deck because the book is great, but this is the difficulty. I'm not a huge fan of the cardstock, and I know from the review that I saw online, and she was quite right, Kelly from the Truth and Story, she was quite right. The cardstock, for me personally, it's not something that I love. It feels like cardboard, basically, thick cardboard, and there's a graininess to it which I'm not loving, and so that has slightly put me off this deck, to be very honest with you. And finally, the other thing that I kind of like wasn't a huge fan of was, and I know this might be a bit weird, but the cards aren't completely aligned in their cart. And I actually see that. I actually see that the cards aren't aligned every time I look at it. And maybe it's my OCD, but that really makes me think, okay, so, I don't regret it in the way that, like, is it the worst purchase I've ever made in my life? No way, because I still learn a lot. I learn a lot from the deck. I learn a lot from the guidebook. I enjoy the deck in the sense that the images are gorgeous. It reads really well. It's slightly pippish. It's a deck that just, if you see it, I have, the artist has just done such a fantastic job. The author and the artist and it's illustrated and written by, I should just mention, Jean-Marie Hazel. So, sorry, it's Jean-Marie Hazel, but it's just a really good example of when, I'm buying something and then later I'm like, not sure if I should have bought that. So you can see, and I don't regret it in the sense of the content, the content of the deck in any which way, but the cardstock, of course, has annoyed me a little bit. So this is an example. And I think if I'd done a little bit more checking the reviews of this deck, I would probably have found that the cardstock is not for me either. And the other thing that I've learned, maybe it might help you all, is that I also noted who the publisher was. And so it helps me to know that this publisher, this is what I'm going to get right now. And maybe they'll change their printing, but at least I have an idea of that. So those are some of the tips that I'm giving. I'm just checking how long this video is, but hopefully these help you. The other thing, and I think many tarot tubers already mentioned this, they mentioned set a budget. I agree with that. I would suggest set a monthly budget, and the reason why I say monthly budget is that if you, let's say, put 50 euros or 20 euros aside per month, or 80 or whatever it is, first of all, if you see a deck that you really fall in love with, let's say it's an independent deck, which I've got right now. There's an independent deck that I've seen that I'm like, right, I really would love this. I need to think about the fact that perhaps I don't buy something for this month so that I actually add it up in order to have two months worth of money to spend on an independent deck. So just to be really clear here, that a monthly budget helps me think, okay, if I really want to spend X amount of money, do I need to roll over the savings so that I have enough for when I want to make that purchase? That's one thing. The other thing about the budget, and I do want to flag this, is if you live, and this is really applicable, especially because I'm within the EU 27, it's probably applicable within the UK as well. We've just had new laws introduced from the 1st of July regarding VAT, which I don't think will be a massive impact, but it has been part of a broader story, especially regarding tarot decks, and especially because we fall in love with independent decks, indie decks. Please do account for things like shipping, and do account for customs duty. I have had a deck held to ransom and they won't release it. And so, I've spent 30 euros on a deck. I know it's 20 euros or 15 euros shipping. Okay, that's 45. And then the local post office turns around and says, we've calculated you need to pay another 15 on top or another 20 on top to have it released because that's your customs duty. And, and so a 30 euro deck is now going to be nearly 60 euros. And so I just want to put that forward, that if you're someone that lives in a location where customs applies, do factor in the fact that you might have to pay a little bit more to have your deck released. So just thinking about these things, I think, are really important. And finally, because we're now at 14 minutes, so I'm going to stop soon. Finally, just one thing to say is it's okay to not buy a deck that everybody else is buying because it just is not your jam. And it's okay to buy a deck that everybody else is buying and to be part of just like, everybody else has it and I'm not unique, but that's fine because I love it. But also it's good to address that FOMO, that fear of missing out, because I think that I definitely suffer from that. Everybody has this latest deck and I want it too. It's okay to say, you know what, I have the deck that I'm going to mention. Actually, I do want to mention it was Tarot of the Abyss. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's got a hold of a copy of it. And it's beautiful, but it just doesn't resonate with me. I'm really funny about black and white decks, and it's just not, something's not clicking. And so I'm seeing people order it, and I would love to have it and do a review, but it's like, maybe I want to spend that 20 euros somewhere else. So, this is a really good example of when I've actually turned around and said, okay, don't hit the buy. And it's okay to be the last person at the party to buy it than, spending that money, and it just sits on my shelf. And it's not just about the budget, but it's also, it takes up space in your home. And then you have to sell it on or whatever. It's another waste. And in this and in today's world, I think a lot of us are now trying to address that whole consumerism. So I've gone on long enough. I hope some of these tips help. If you're new, I hope it just quells your fears, or like, I'm not doing good enough, my shelf is not packed. Like, you might look at me right now and go, my gosh, she's got all those decks. I mean, they've been built up over a period of time. Some of them I got on sale, and I made sure I got them on sale. 1 or 2 are gifted. Stuff like that happens. So don't compare what somebody else has and think my shelf needs to look like that. Just don't do that. So anyway, I hope that helps you, and see you next week. Thank you for watching.